So with the house show tour that you guys did, and then the subsequent last round of touring for Expire as the entity Expire, did you find that the shows as they were, like that's how they always were, or were you finding a lot more people coming out just to kind of pay their respects, as it were?
I think it was like a bit of a combination. First off, no matter how clearly we when we announced that we were breaking up and how clear we were about this is not happening at this exact moment, whatever, it seemed like every show we would play, people would be like, "Oh, this is your last tour." And it's like, "No, you really didn't read it. You read you read down until you saw whatever date was in your city, which in weird ways, I mean,
Worked to
honestly
your favor?
helped the shows because then we didn't announce the last tour until after people knew it was happening if they would have read to the bottom. But they didn't, most didn't, and they saw the house show tour as their last opportunity to see the band. So I think that coupled with, I mean, there were a lot of older friends that came out to that tour, partially because it was the first tour that was fully band booked. Like I booked the whole thing in years, so there was a bit of like a that sort of thing, like a throwback kind of oh, they're just doing it, you kind
DIY.
of have to be in the know. And I kept it very addresses. I mean, people knew some of the houses, whatever, and some addresses got announced too soon, but I made it so addresses got announced day of, and whether that hurt the show or helped the show, because it made it mysterious, I just kind of rolled with it. And I liked, there were two shows on the tour that were cool, but kind of just okay because
Of that.
because of that. And I was going into it being there, I almost want there to be a show where 10 kids show up and it feels like my first tour. It feels like you're back in a house and you're playing and no one knew you were coming
And you're
and blah
paying your
blah blah.
dues.
Yeah, there were we did two Cleveland shows in one day.
I think that was the day
And
after mine.
yes,
Okay.
yes. So, and I mean, part of it was the fact that we did two shows. Part of it was neither of the addresses, the address thing wasn't announced. And I think, and neither of the shows were bad by any means. But if someone was like, what were like, because both of them probably had 40 people at them, and it was cool. But then on the same note, there's this bit of the people doing the house, whose house it is, kind of know about the band. So some people wanted to do pre-sale for their house because they were worried that too many people were going to show up and it would get really bad. And then that's kind of how those show went. Both of them did pre-sale and only wanted 50 because they thought their basements were too small, 50 people, whatever. And it was fine. 50 people, showed up to both shows and they were fun. But it definitely was, you could just tell we all got there and it was the person would kind of mentioned that, oh, I guess we could have fit a few more people in here, which is fine. I had no, I was stoked on all of it. There were shows that I couldn't breathe and I was fighting for my equipment, and then there were shows that the Cleveland ones that were this is 50 kids and every one of them are stoked to be here, and then we're gonna go to the next show, the late one, and play that, and it was cool, man. But I think, going back to the question, I think that tour kind of everything. The house show brought out people who mistakenly thought it was the last tour, old friends who kind of were just like, man, I haven't seen Expire in a setting like this in 5 6 years. um I think it was a lot of different kind, and then there was people that had seen us on 4 Year Strong tours who were coming into a setting like that being like, this is insane, and I never even knew that this happened. Like, who only go, to bigger venues, who only have ever seen shows where you can hear everything going on, a mic will never break, you can always see and you're not having to touch anyone, and it kind of made it was cool, man. It made it so the last couple years of Expire, we did a lot of mixed bill stuff, and I loved it, but it made all those people that we saw on those tours come into our world and come into the world. Like we went out into that
Right.
and maybe got out of our comfort zone, put some people that really liked Expire out of their comfort zone, having to like sit through a pop punk show if they don't like that kind of stuff, or sit through a metalcore, whatever. It brought people that had fucked with us for a long time out of that. But then on that house show tour, we got to come back and be like, and if you like the band, you get to come into our realm now, and you
Right.
get to see where we come from. And I thought that was like a really cool thing, and like a good like coming full circle type feeling, where we do all this stuff and people fall off and maybe don't like the band as much or whatever, but then it was just like people would see that and go, okay, I get it, like that's cool.
Yeah, it definitely was a fun atmosphere for my
Oh
house.
yeah,
I know a
oh that
lot
was
of.
crazy.
I mean,
Great.
it's part of my ceiling breaking and shit.
Oh yeah, right, all the tiles and shit,
Yeah, I
um
it was definitely one of those things that, as someone who puts on shows and has kind of done a few house shows myself and in my own house,
yeah,
that it reminded me of what got me into going to see live bands, is just feeling that intimacy of
yeah,
the connection of
absolutely,
being right there on top of a band, being there, having people sweating all over you and touching you, and kind of like
yeah,
having no personal space but loving every minute of it because you're
oh
there
yeah,
for the music. And it reminded, and all things considered, like we had 130 paid people walk in, plus all the bands, plus some random people.
whoever, yeah, right,
Yeah, so I mean, it's like you figure there's probably at least 150 people crammed in my basement and
yeah,
surrounding
awesome.
areas, and it was probably the most behaved crowd like that I've ever seen at a hardcore show, like that.
Yeah, hmm,
And to me, like that was my big walkaway. It's like I've been to shows in legit venues that aren't run as nice, as
hmm,
tightly ran, and the camaraderie there, like people just assholes and whatever. And that was a takeaway for me that night. And I was kind of like, man, if this is kind of like what is indicative of the whole house show tour for you guys, like I'm really stoked for you guys, because that's a feeling that like stays with you for like days. It stuck with me for at least like a week. I just rode that high of that show and that
yep,
feeling for like a week, and I was like, you guys are doing this like pretty much every night for like 2 weeks or so.
yep. It was really cool. Like that was a tour that I've wanted to do for years, and it just never made sense. It never worked timing wise. Like there were times it would have made sense, but because I mean, it took calling it as far as the band goes to be able to go. Okay, well, we have this essentially a last year, and it doesn't matter what anyone else who's kind of tried to have a finger in the band um, wants to do. It's like, okay, it's just because I mean, it happens. You get kind of wrapped up in, especially a band like us that we're touring 6, 8, 10 months a year. Um, it's our jobs. Like that's how I lived for years, and how I could pay my bills and things like that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But it does make it from time to time you have to consider the fact that okay, no one has a job. Um, should we do this house show tour now, or it's something we can set on the back burner and take this other tour that we still get to play shows, we still get to show the band to new people and get new people into this, but it also makes sure that we can continue to do this. Like
Right.
that's the reality of it. And with hardcore, there comes this weird kind of that's like a weird stigma about it, and people are very. It's this culture that's you know from the streets or whatever. But now that and money is not an issue and blah blah blah. Like it's not about the money, but like things change. This isn't the '80s. This isn't like and no disrespect to any bands that came from that, but this it's not the same. It's not how it is now. People don't find bands because they have to travel for them. People find bands because of who has the coolest demo that week that Twitter's talking about, or who turned their band into a fucking internet meme, or whatever. Like that's how it works now. And I think, you know, it made it cool to be able to come back after all those tours where we had to put it off and kind of, focus on making sure we were good and progressing the band. so that we could, and making money, it's part of it. And to be able to come back and just do this and be like, this is the last year of the band, like we're never going to do this again. Um, let's do whatever we want, 100%. Like no, fuck a whatever booking agent wants us to do something different. Fuck whatever manager is trying to pressure us into some show or some tour that we think is bullshit. Like we're just gonna do a couple tours that we really like and then call it.
With I would say most notably Motley Crue in the last year, I think it's been at this point since they've called it a day as being as far as being a live band. That's the
Sure.
loophole. That's the loophole I don't think anyone's caught on to yet.
Yeah.
Um, was there was there a lot of like maybe like, oh, you guys are just saying this just because, like, did you get a lot of like backlash like to that, or were people just like kind of like, oh, this sucks, and be stoked on the last handful of shows that we may have that are like in your touring run?
Like you mean
Like in the sense of like, I remember when Motley Crue called it a day, and they're like, "Hey, this is going to be our last tour." However, it's going to just very much like you did. You're like, we again, people don't read, but
yeah.
this is we're going to do these last run of shows. We're going to announce another tour in the States. We're going to be hitting Europe. We're going to be hitting Japan. Like Motley, when they announced that they were done, they said like,
Huh?
we're going to probably be touring for 2 years, so it's not going to
Yeah.
be an immediate thing. However, when the tour is done on such and such date, we're done. We're not going to be playing live anymore.
Sure.
And a lot of people were like, "Oh, this sucks. It sucks." But then there are a lot of people who are like, "Well, better to pack it up when you're still ahead and still able to play at a decent
Yeah.
level." So just kind of wondering, since they were one of the few bands I could think of that kind of called it a day without it being like, "Oh, someone died. There's an injury going on.
Yeah.
Something else happening." If what the response was when you guys decided to call it a day, was it more like
I
stoked on you guys at least kind of doing it on your own terms, or more like
I think it
bummed?
was that. I think it was the way that we presented it because none of us like hate each other. You're always going to have band differences. You're in the same
Tube.
moving 5 by 12 box for months, and you with guys that you eat with, you sleep next to, you shit next to. They know all the good things about your personality, and they know all the little shitty things you do too. And but at the end of it, I don't think any of us, it wasn't like this super negative thing. It was just kind of like, if anything, I think it was preventing that from coming. It was kind of like, hey, we're all kind of wanting different things. Like there was, and to be fully blunt, Josh wasn't stoked on touring anymore, but was still doing it and not necessarily seeing it as this terrible thing. He was just kind of like, I'm doing it because you guys, this is just what I do. He's like, I like playing shows. I love hardcore. I love making music, but the traveling 6, 8, that wears on somebody. That nomadic lifestyle is, I truly don't think that humans are necessarily wired for that. All like, and the ones that are few and far between. Um, and the traveling to him, it kind of, he was like, I'm fucking tired. Like I'm, it's physically wearing on me. It's, and a lot of it, you can't have stable things. Like there is no routine. There's the
Right.
routine of the road, which is, yeah, there's some routine to it, but as far as like having a whole, it's not like you're like, okay, every other month I'm on tour and it's no more, no less. So my family knows this and this. It's sporadic. It's like, oh yeah, well we have like only a little bit of touring, but there's full days of travel where you're not yourself, you're out of your element, you're on 3 flights, all this shit. And he was just kind of like, I'm fucking tired, and that's how I feel. And I think, I want to say one of his suggestions, and this might be wrong, but I feel because a lot of stuff happened this one night in this big talk we were having, and kind of everything all snowballed into this 6 hour conversation that included like eating dinner and like everything. And it spilled over to the next morning when we like made the final decision. But a lot of it was just like he wanted to kind of chill, and has like a, a good home life that he's never been able to give a lot of time to. Um, at least since I met him, like he moved to Milwaukee, and within 4 months, I had him on the road, uh, gone. That's it. Like I had never met him. We met a few months. We met. The second time I ever met Josh was when Marcus and I brought him in to see how it would be being in a band with him. That was I had met Josh once before that for about 5 minutes. All I knew is that he wanted to go, and he didn't care where. He was just like, I'm ready. So like that mentality, and then you fast forward 7, 8 years. Yeah, I mean it's hard, man. Like, but then there's me on the other side who, until I physically can't do this anymore, this is the only thing that really makes sense to me. So but the dynamic of the band has always been go, 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 go. And we've never been a band that could just play 5 shows a year and people give a shit and shit like that, like, or that we still have the same like fire about it. So I was like, well, I'd rather, if we're gonna end it, kind of the only way I'll agree and make sure everything's on good terms and everyone's happy is if you guys essentially give me a year. Give me one more year, finish this record, we can go everywhere one more time. Like, by everywhere I mean like go to Europe, go to Japan, go to Australia, do Canada again, like places that we have friends. Because I don't know if there's certain guys from Expire who are gonna see any of those people or those places ever again in their lives. It's just
Right.
how, it's nothing wrong with it, but it's just you saw it, and you stop this lifestyle, and all of a sudden things get really expensive.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
you know what I mean? Like you don't have, oh, I want to go to Japan. Well, you don't have a promoter there who's being like, oh, I would love to pay for your flights. You go, oh, I have to pay for these. Oh, I have to pay for hotel. Oh my god, I have to do everything. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's how it is. So it just, there was no bad blood about it. I think we did it our own way, and I think the majority of the people who kind of saw how we were doing it and read kind of the explanation that we had posted about it and stuff like that. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a feeling I needed to explain it to anyone. It's just like if you knew the band and saw what we were doing and how we were going out, it was the only way that made sense. Excuse me, only way that made sense.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been go since day one, and ending it any other way uh, just sucks. Like there's nothing good about that. So I think the way we did it was very positive and very made sure everyone was happy, and we were happy. Fans of the band were happy.
Kind of the last, I would say, like maybe two questions on the Expire
Sure,
time.
sure.
When putting together that documentary that
Yeah,
put for the house show tour,
yeah.
what's it like to be in the mid? Actually, I think you started it. It looked like you did the interviews. I think before you actually started that tour, if my timeline is correct, right? Or did you do it after it was done?
We did it afterwards. We did
Uh,
it like the day, like the I'm trying to think, because the last show was in Milwaukee. I
yeah.
think we might have started them that night
Okay.
after
Because
the show,
some
or
of
like the
the some
very
of
next.
the interview parts made it
Yeah.
seem like it was being done like the day before you left for the tour. So I was kind of wasn't
No, I think
sure.
the guys, my buddies who did it, kind of just they're really good at it. Like, and they're kind of they made questions so they could place them throughout
Okay.
it, and it could talk as it went along,
Okay.
and sort of narrate it.
But the question I had then, and it still applies, even regardless
Sure.
if you did the interviews after, but doing so quickly afterward, it works as well. Was it hard to talk about, because you still had tours coming up, but was it weird to kind of talk about the band like it was already done? And to then, when the thing came out, having kind of watching it and being like, this is the end, and kind of putting
Yeah.
like a stamp kind of on it, like this is here's the
Right.
thing that talks about us, and as we are going to be no more.
To me, and a lot of, I mean, this is like worded slightly differently, but a lot of friends have asked me similar questions, or maybe a more broad, like, you know you've known this was happening for a while and you still had stuff to do, how do you feel? And for me, I can't really speak on the other guys, but for me, it was we as a band decided that we were going to break up in March of last year. And we didn't announce it until August. So
Yeah.
we were kind of just sitting on it. And, like we went to Europe and took Cross Me with us. And like all of them knew, but I mean, we still we didn't announce it. We all knew, like, there were certain cities on that tour that I was like, we can't really, we weren't saying it at shows, but all of us were like, this is the last time we're ever going to be here. Like, we went to places like Greece and Bulgaria and shit like that for the first time and the last time as a band. And to me, going back and watching it, it wasn't it like there were little parts that I like bummed me out, but mostly just like when my bandmates talk because we are like we're all friends, but we don't always like say that kind of shit to each other and like talk about each other and like stuff like that. As far in this like all encompassing way,
Right.
so that was really the only thing that got me, you know, slightly emotional about it. But I mean, I've had all this time from it was almost an entire year from when we decided, then we had this length of time until it was announced that was just kind of like us sitting in this decision and being like, okay, well, nobody else knows about this. And in reality, we have all this time that if things change or if people are home for a little while and go, yeah, we can, we haven't announced anything. We've told a couple friends, but that doesn't mean anything. Like,
Right.
but it kind I think everyone was just I'm a very what's the next move like and like what's the next thing and kind of as soon as everyone was and as soon as I know that someone not necessarily doesn't want to be there but is tired of being there as far as being on tour like Josh or even Caleb a little bit. I was kind of like okay, I'm next thing, like there's no going back from this. I mentally check out really fast. And not in like a I don't care way, just in like a okay, I'm gonna wrap up everything I need to do with this and I'm gonna do the next thing, which is like doing Stone now. But no, like watching the documentary it made me happy because like everyone involved with it was a friend. It was like my band. The two guys that filmed it have been some of my best friends for close to 15 years. Like I grew up in Iowa with them and they moved out to California and I was like, I won't want anyone else to do this except you guys. I'm going to fly you out and we're going to make it happen. And like, all the shows were booked by friends and it was just cool, man. It was watching it didn't really get me too worked up. It didn't really make me like overly emotional about shit. It was just kind of like this is sick. I'm glad that this happened and yeah, it was awesome. What's up, player? I gotta finish this thing. Oh, hang on for a second.
Um, you actually already brought up Stone and kind of segued
Sure.
into a question I was going to ask, which was it easier to kind of do the other tours knowing that you had something to jump right into, more or less, and kind of reshift and focus on that, which sounds like
Oh,
that is exactly
absolutely,
what it was.
absolutely. We started a Stone tour the morning after the last Expire show. Like
Did
there
you
was
do
no
that
day.
intentionally, so you like could?
I did it. I did it sort of intentionally. It kind of just worked out timing wise. Like we got offered to do the show, to do the Stone shows, and I got the dates, and I was like, this literally butts up with like the last tour. Like we missed. I think that man Judiciary did like one or two shows before meeting up with us, but that was like, this is what makes sense. Okay, let's do it. And there was a little part of me that I didn't really like bring up to because Marcus, who played drums and Expire, plays bass in Stone now. I didn't really bring it up to him. He was like not unhappy with me, but he was like the day after, like, you fucking kidding me? Like, I've just been on tour for close to six. Like, I mean, you want to factor in like Japan and shit like that. Like, he'd been on tour for 6, 7 weeks, and then like the dynamic of it was so different, and so like you're doing the last Expire tour where it's very emotional, and I have people coming up to me every night and saying what the band meant to them, and it was a very. I'm not great with stuff like that. It's just kind of like, thank you.
Yeah, what do
Like,
you do with
you know what I
that?
mean? Like, it's cool, and I'm very humbled by it, and I appreciate it, and it's cool that my band could do something for individual people like that. But at the same time, like, how do you necessarily react to that? Um, but going from that and then doing something like the last show where there's like 600-700 of your friends there, the next day getting up at 7 a.m., driving to Columbus, Ohio, and playing for 30 kids in a coffee bar was just like, this was very like, and okay, that is done. And that is very done. Now we're in this. This is how this is going to go. And it kind of, I think for Marcus at least, it kind of cushioned the mental blow of like, holy shit, it's like actually done. Like, I played my last Expire show. And, where maybe beforehand he was like, God, you got me out for another like 12 days. Like, I'll do it, but like, this is insane. I can't believe we don't even get a day off. But
Um,
at the end of it, he was very like, I get it. It helped. Like, so there was part of it that was intentional, but I didn't know if it would work the way I wanted it to. I was kind of like, I hope this helps Marcus. And it did, and I was like, whew, okay, he's not just mad.
with doing the Stone stuff now,
Yep.
and that being the focus, obviously,
Yep.
you opened up a venue as well out where you're at. What does that look like trying to balance a not a new band, but a new in the sense that it's now the full time commitment as far as a band,
Yeah.
and now also being like a business owner of sorts and a little
Um.
legit like brick and mortar.
Luckily, a lot of the like the grunt work and the startup was done. We've been working on this venue for like a year. There's been lots of roadblocks, like slow landlord on shit, like little things breaking, things with like the sit. Like the last month since I've gotten home from the Stone tour has been this nightmare with finishing things and getting approvals from construction permits, plumbing permits, fire permit, all this shit. Um, but that actually all kind of happened since I've been home, so it was kind of a nice. Okay, well, I have this thing to focus on right now and get all of it squared away and make us fully legal and everything good. But I have a dude, a friend of mine, Lenny, who I've been, is a really good friend of mine for years. It's actually both of us. It's very like he kind of is the workload behind it. Like he knows how to build everything. He runs all the electric. He's kind of like the handyman. And then I'm the one that's like, honestly, like I have this money from Expire and I want to give back to Milwaukee and give back to here. And there's no better way than just kind of making this new place for bands, and because it has practice spaces inside it so bands can rent out for the month and do that thing, and then there's a venue in it, and it's cool, man. I couldn't do it without Lenny. Like he is without question like the only reason it's able to I think it's kind of both of us. It's very like he couldn't do it without me and me being able to support it in my way. I couldn't do it without him taking care of shit while I'm gone. Like he's in there building, and I had like like the month I had off during all the last Expire stuff, I had knee surgery. So I'm kind of like in there on crutches, but I can't do anything. I can't even lift a piece of plywood because I'm not supposed to have any weight, any extra weight, shit like that. So he just crushed it. And now it's kind of things are going smooth now, and it's self-sufficient, which is the best part, is because of the practice spaces in there, it just kind of rides, and it's I don't have to worry about. I mean, there's like little thing, people paying rent late and
Right.
standard stuff, but overall it runs smooth and it's cool, and it's something for the city and for the scene here that I think is much needed. So yeah, I mean, juggling it isn't terrible. It's and also when I'm off tour, I don't do anything. Like I kind of like have little odd random jobs I do or whatever. But honestly, it's just like turning the leaf over onto Stone. It's just like that's my focus now, and I'm gonna play the same role as I did for Expire just band at it and manage the band and make sure things are cool and make sure we can do it for real. So yeah, it's the venue's sick, man. Triple Zero is awesome.
If is there ever going to be a point maybe where you decide to step away from the touring aspect of things and just focus more on the behind the scenes thing between having your own venue and maybe like being a band manager or running a small label or something?
I could see a label for sure. I've thought about it like recently a lot actually about doing a label. Managing, yes and no. I like
It always seems
it's
like one of those. It's a
yeah,
thankless
it's kind of
job.
like I'll never do it while I'm in a band. Like I have friends that do it, and kudos to them. Whatever. I'll never do it in a band. I feel to me it feels like a pretty crazy conflict of interest. Like if I'm managing other bands but also managing my own band, it doesn't make sense. Or like being a booking agent while you have a band. Some of my friends do it and it's great and they kill it. It doesn't make sense in my head. Like to me it's a very you're either on the band side or you know you got the suit on. That's it. And it, and there's this huge part of me like coming from punk rock and coming from the way that I came up in hardcore where it's just like the older I've gotten I've had to work with the industry side of things and work with the suit side of things because you realize going like this doesn't change anything and only hurts you, but you can work together while knowing in the back of your head who to keep at arm's length and who to not. And I never want to be someone that people look at me and go, yeah, like his band's cool, but like I can't talk to him about some things because I
Right.
got to keep him. I got to keep him back because he's just fully like looking out for other people or like has other interests or whatever. So managing, like I've helped. I would rather just be the guy that my friends can come to and be like, "What do you think of this?" And I'd be like, "I don't want any money. I would love to just see you succeed.
Right.
I would love to just like Cross Me was a big example of that. I helped them in a lot of ways. Don't want any money. I don't want them to like tell anyone I'm managing their band. It was more like teaching them to fish rather than just being like, here's this, here's this, here's this, here's this. It was just like, well, how do you hit up a label? It's just like, well, here's what I did. You need to do it yourself. Like teaching friends bands how to do it from what I've learned and good things I've done and my fuck ups too, and being like, oh shit, like it took me doing this really wrong to be able to know how to do it right. Um, so just stuff like that. The suit side, I don't think is for me. I mostly hate it. I,
It's
you know, though I do trust the suits who have been in bands more.
I was gonna say it seems like there's been a nice shift to at least with a lot of the labels that I've followed and the people that work, it's like for every shitty suit manager type person there's
Uh-huh.
someone like Biggie or over at a Good Fight and
Yep.
like
Yep.
Carl from Ferret Good Fight and people like
Mm.
John James Ryan and stuff like that who are
Yep.
in the trenches but hasn't
Yep.
really changed who they are.
Yeah.
And
I
I feel like
think.
that's kind of how at least in the metal hardcore scene, I feel like that's the shift that's been happening over the last, I'd say 5, 10, well, probably like 10, 15 years really, where it's kind
I
of,
I agree. I think it needs that. It needs like it's hard from speaking from someone in bands. It's hard to trust someone who is supposed to have your best interests in mind, who has never had to do a 12-hour overnight drive,
right.
who has never showed up to a show and gotten paid $5 and has to drive 8 hours and you just played for the promoter.
Yep.
I can't trust someone like that. I can't trust them to the level I would trust someone who had, like you said, been in the trenches, who had played the shit shows, like who honestly has the negative experiences matter more to me than the really good ones. Like, oh, cool, like I was in this band and it was just like good, 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 good. Like, fuck that. How can I trust you when something bad happens? Or how can I trust you to look at a routing that has 5 10-hour drives in a row and not veto that shit? Like, you're gonna
Yeah.
kill the band. You're gonna make them hate touring. And I know managers and agents like that, and it's like that's cool. You somehow convince some bands to put their lives in your hands. That's fine. Maybe you do a really good job for them. You get them on good shows and they make money and blah blah blah. But like the second those bands something goes wrong for those bands, I don't think you're equipped enough to like as well as someone who has been in a band to know how to remedy that. And I feel like the bands have to play the shitty shows. That's the only way that you get through it. It makes the good shows better, and it toughens your skin a little bit. You're not this, super fragile little thing in a van, and if it's too hot, you're like bitching, or if the show had 20 kids at it that loved your band and would die for your band,
Bought no
you
merch.
would have rather played the show with 200 kids that couldn't have that were just there because it was a social gathering.
Right.
Like play the shitty shows, play everywhere. God, like I hate this idea of like, and this is like some Midwest shit coming out. People skipping people skipping over certain areas, or managers or agents having them skip cities based on money or based on whatever. Coming from a Midwest band, there is nowhere that gives a shit more that your band came to their shitty town than all the weird little shitty towns. Like
Yeah.
every single band wants to play Chicago. Every single band wants to play LA. Every band wants to play New York. Cool. Great. Play the weird ones because those people are like, they came to my town. That is the shit. In all honesty, in a not a bad way, play fucking Grand Rapids. Play, where I'm from, Cedar Falls, Iowa. Play these little towns, and that's it. Like that's like those people will remember you. While sometimes the bigger ones, there's 3 shows in a week,
Yeah.
and they go, oh yeah, that was cool. I don't really remember. Fuck, there was like a bunch of shows
Show
like
fatigue.
that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, it's just how it is, man. Like play the smaller towns and but the guys in bands, I feel like understand that more on the
Yeah.
soup side.
No, it was crazy. I remember doing like I for a summer living back in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Yeah,
Did a tour, and the only reason I even got in a band was because I drank my eventual singer's pitcher of whiskey coke at a bar,
nice,
and that was the only reason I got into the band.
nice,
And I never learned the set. I never learned. They asked me if I could play guitar, and I said yeah. And they go, "Cool, you're our bass player."
nice.
And it was shitty. But I
Awesome.
remember we did a really, really, really shitty tour that some booking agent, and I'm doing air quotes,
Okay.
did, and we ended up going. First date from Michigan was Greenbrier, Tennessee, which is
Yeah.
about 10.5 hours away from us.
And also, like, what the fuck is that?
Well, here, yeah, yeah, no, exactly. And the best part is, it was across the street from an elementary,
Yeah.
which on their little marquee said it was voted the best elementary or highest tested elementary in the like they were in the top 5 in the U.S. And I was like, bullshit. and
Oh,
uh,
weird. Yeah.
and then I remember we got out. It was at a coffee house, and some kid gets out, and like after a 10-hour drive, which in a cramp, in our van and our trailer fucked up, so we had to use our singer's Ford Escape,
Okay.
and we had to rent a U-Haul trailer that we said since we were all college age, we were like, oh, we're moving back to the UP, so we need this for like a week
Oh,
to
I did the same thing on the last Expire tour.
yeah.
Told them I was moving. Took it for 5 weeks.
Yeah. So I ended up we ended up doing that and just crammed into this fucking Ford Escape, and our guitar player was like looked like Chris Farley and was about the same size.
Nice.
And so it was cramped as
Awesome.
fuck. And I
Yeah.
remember getting there, and as soon as we got out, this hillbilly redneck kid, because like I said, middle of like Deliverance nowhere, goes, "Y'all in Norma Source? Y'all from Michigan? Y'all like ICP?" And I was like, I've been out of the car for like literally 2 minutes,
I love it.
and
I
I was
love it.
like, I need to find a liquor store like right now. I can't handle this.
Right.
I didn't just drive 10 hours to get to hear that. Like, we must love ICP because we're from
Oh, you
Michigan.
have to. Oh, I get the Iowa thing. People find out I'm from Iowa. I was like,
Oh, do you
yes.
like Slipknot?
Fuck them.
Actually, I think I would have fucked with you more. Oh no, they're not from there. Never mind. I was gonna say Mushroom Head. They're from Cleveland.
Yeah, they're Cleveland.
Whatever. Mass. It's all the same. But no,
Douche.
I mean, I had that experience. Saw the world's biggest subway, and then when I went there and it wasn't, and I was like, well, how? When was this the biggest? Oh, it was like 7 years ago. And I was like, well, shouldn't you
Nice.
take that sign down? They're like, it still brings people. And I was like, that's horse.
Absolutely, it brings people.
That's horseshit.
Good shit.
But
Good.
no, I definitely like that's why like I don't mind having bands stay at my house and shit like that because it's like
Yeah.
I've done those like 10-hour drives when you're cramped and smells like farts and
Oh yeah.
you have no money and you're lucky to have a can of Chef Boyardee with a pop top.
There you go.
But Stone, what can we look forward to with that in the next year or so?
We are. What's the date? What
I
date
was
is
gonna
it?
say, I think I've already told you I know some of the stuff that's going on, but I don't know if you can announce half of it or whatever.
Yeah, we're going to record an LP in June for a week in Chicago at Bricktop with Mr. Andy Nelson. That'll be cool. I'm excited. Yeah, then the LP is not going to be out till next year. That's kind of why we're waiting on kind of talking about it even like at all. It's going to come out really early next year, and talking about an LP like a year in advance kind of blow your load a little early. Um, so
Well, it's one
we
of those
are
things. I think if people understand why it takes so long, then there's the writing on the wall that they can infer from there.
exactly. So yeah, waiting, doing that, and then we leave for a tour like of Western Canada and mostly full US. Um, we finish recording on the 18th and we start a tour on the 19th. So in Fargo. So yeah, man, we're just gonna go. It's gonna be great. I'm very excited. That'll be Western Canada. We're alone, and then this band Broken Teeth from the UK are meeting up in like San Francisco. So we'll do a few weeks with them. That'll be cool. And then gonna just hang for August and kind of just regroup before a bunch of stuff in the fall. Kind of waiting on a few things to get ironed out, but we will be busy throughout the fall. I think we'll be back in Europe. Well, not back. I'll be back, but Stone's first time.
I was gonna say it
Um,
would seem like maybe with having a band that's from overseas, kind of like doing that like show trade, but on a way bigger
yeah,
scale.
it's that's kind of the vibe is just kind of we're trading and seeing how it goes. It'll be cool, man. Stone's weirdly enough, we played London once on like a because of the Expire Cross Me tour. It was everyone in Stone was there,
Right.
and um, so we actually played the London show on that tour. It was cool. It was very sick. But yeah, so no, and actually we've actually played the Glasgow show too, like two songs, but it was fun. So yeah, that's it, man. Just gonna be busy, very
Is it?
busy.
Have you gotten used to not having a guitar in your hand when you're performing yet?
Oh, I love it. Jesus Christ, it's so sick. Like I don't have gear. I don't have strings breaking. I don't have.
Are you gonna be that singer now that doesn't like when your set's done, you just go to the merch table and hang out and don't
I
have
mean,
to.
I do that, but only because we don't really bring like a merch guy with us right now. So it's kind of like I need to,
Right.
but I'm not like I'm not helping load like blah 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 like any of that bullshit. I hate that shit. Like you're in the band, you're in the band. Everybody helps. You sleep around everyone's gear. You help.
Right.
But yeah, it's cool, man. It's a totally different dynamic, but I like it so much, and it's I can kind of just control the vibe. Like that's what a singer is supposed to do. I feel like you're supposed to. If there's not energy, you create it, and if there already is energy, you kind of direct it. You know what I mean? It's fucking sick. I love it.
It's always been one of those like one of my favorite bands is him, and I always remember when their singer was like used to play bass, and then they got a bass player, and he was like, I didn't know what to do, so I just started smoking cigarettes even more than I already did, just because I was
Yeah,
like, I don't know what the fuck to do with my hands.
right.
So I
I
always
had
wondered
a
if that was kind of the same. I think I saw you make a mention. You're like, oh, like the last day of tour. You're like, oh, it's the first show where I didn't use the mic stand.
yeah. I was a mic stand guy for a while. I had like it was I guess
A crutch of sorts.
yeah, sort of. Yeah, I guess I never really thought about it that way, but it gave me this kind of barrier between people that I was so used to with having a guitar. But I think it just you just get used to it and you're like, okay, now it's just and then you show up to venues where it's a shitty mic stand or it's the wrong, it's got all the leg, it's like a boom and it's fucking up on you and it's all over the place and you look like an idiot. So you're just like, okay, like let's eliminate more of the shit. And be done with that. So it's cool. I
Well,
like
I
it.
was gonna say, always like to end the episodes with a song. So pick a song, and maybe if it's one of yours, because someone has thrown a curveball the last couple of times and asked to play something that they weren't a part of. But if it is something that is yours, maybe a backstory on it a little bit.
Ooh, we'll do a Stone song then. Uh, let me think. Gotta do a good one. Um, there's I don't know what you have access to right now, but there's
If it's on the internet, I'm sure I can get it.
okay. Well, we do
Or worst case, I will just hit you up and be like, "Hey, send me that."
we have a song called Sacrifice that's pretty sick. That is one of my favorites. We don't play it as much anymore because like I'm kind of the only one that really likes it. But um, it's like this like real noodly thing, and then this kind of like Metallica stompy thing. But I like it a lot, and it I guess that song is I kind of bit a little bit of like a Buried Alive vibe, and it's kind of like from their song. I think their song is called My Sacrifice, or maybe it's just called Sacrifice. I don't know, but it's very much about like this and about doing whatever you need to do to make things like your band or things like a venue or things like your hardcore scene grow, and whether it's good or bad things, whatever you have to do to get from today to tomorrow. So that's a pretty big deal. I like that song. That's good. And it's just a riffer, dude. Riff sound is sick. Right.
Well, I guess that's where we'll
Cool.
end it. So thank
Love
you
it.
for your time.
Yeah, fuck yeah, dude. Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, not a problem. I'll let
No,
you know when it's out.
no doubt. I'll talk to you
Enjoy the
soon.
rest of your Chick-fil-A.
Oh, it's gone. Been
Oh.
gone. Hell yeah. All right. Later, buddy.
See ya.